Hi everyone and welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be taking a quick second look at this Asus ETOP 1602. You may remember from part 1, if you haven't seen that I'll put a link down in the description or on the screen somewhere, but I wasn't very impressed with this. It had two main problems as far as I could see. The first of which was the performance of this thing. It just was too sluggish, just too poor. It made it frustrating. The second of which was the touchscreen, which was just a very dated and frustrating to use touchscreen. Well, I can't really do a lot about the touchscreen, but I can do something about the performance of it. I've had a look through the spare parts box and found a couple of things which I've installed inside. First of which is some more memory. It came with 1GB installed. I've put a second 1GB in just to SODIMM to bring it up to 2 gigs. And the second thing is we've got rid of the mechanical hard drive and put an SSD in. The hard drive was a 160GB laptop style 2.5 inch 5400 RPM hard disk. Quite slow, even by the time period of this thing. In its place I've put in a OCZ Vertex 3 60GB SSD. Now, back in its day that was one of the fastest SSDs, and whilst it wouldn't be up to a whole lot today by SSD standards, it'll still be a heck of a lot faster than the hard disk that I've replaced. As you can see there, booted up into a clean install of Windows XP nice and quickly. I had to use the recovery media since we were starting with a blank installation, so we've got a fresh install of what you'd get with this out of the factory, but I've removed a bit of the bloat. I've got rid of some of the touchscreen stuff and some of the auto running stuff since we're not interested in that. So let's have a quick look how you get into this thing and where all the components are, what it's like for upgrading, and then we'll have a quick look at the performance, look at a couple of games, and see if this thing's any more enjoyable to use. It's a piece of cake to get into this ETOP. All you need is a Phillips screwdriver. To start, undo the 4 Phillips screws underneath the handle, and then the whole handle assembly will lift away. After that, you'll see 3 rubber caps below the handle and 1 above. Pop them off, 4 more Phillips screws under there. And then finally, a rubber cap in each corner. Pop those off too. Take out the Phillips screw underneath, and then the case will pop apart. After that, thanks to the form factor of this thing, everything's nicely laid out and easy to get to. Before we jump into the games, just a quick note on how reflective this screen is. Here you can see a still image from the video I recorded of the flyby intro to Unreal Tournament, and it's just really reflective. You can see the camera and a door behind just as much as you can see on screen what you should be seeing. The viewing angles on this screen are quite poor as well. It's not so bad in front of it, but off to the side they're not brilliant. Personally, I'd have preferred just a little bit less of a reflective screen on this. It just gets a little bit too unusable in highlight situations. Anyway, we'll not worry about that too much now. Let's jump into a game of Instagib Capture the Flag on CTF Facing Worlds. I can't show you the graphics options that I've got set up for the game because I filmed that bit before I switched the light off, and unfortunately they're basically unreadable. But it doesn't matter too much because the details for this are all turned up to maximum. We're running at 1366 by 768 resolution, which is the native resolution of this screen. And as you'd expect for a game that came out about 9 years before this PC did, even on this low-end hardware or this low-end CPU, it's running absolutely fine. Frame rate's nice and high, it's nice and fluid. This is absolutely fine to play. It looks fine on the screen with the lights turned down. I could sit and play this quite happily, no problems. Okay, let's jump into Command & Conquer Red Alert 2 from the year 2000. Having a look at the graphics options, you can see everything is turned up to full, not that there's a lot of options for us to pick from. Resolution is at 1024 by 768, which was the maximum resolution that this game supported. And we're just going to jump straight into the first mission of the Soviet campaign. And as we expect, everything's running absolutely fine on this game. There's no slowdowns, there's no choppiness. You know, we don't need a particularly high frame rate to play a game like this, but nonetheless, it's running beautifully and smooth. Now, Red Alert 2, just like all the early Red Alert games and the early Command & Conquer games, has an absolutely fantastic soundtrack. Now, the little speakers built into this E-Top, they're about as good as you would expect for little flat panel speakers of the size, which is to say not particularly good. Totally better than no speakers, of course, but they're quite tinny. There's not really any sort of bass, there's no depth to the sound or anything like that, but just a basic pair of headphones would be much better, I think, for something like this, or even external speakers, but then it does kind of defeat the point of this being an all-in-one. They're definitely lacking for things like games, for things like music, but just for sort of basic sounds in Windows, they're fine for that. Finally, let's give Roller Coaster Tycoon 3 from 2004 a try. Now, the game has selected 800 by 600 resolution for us, and that's in full screen, so it's going to be a little squashed. But it's also generally got detail level and draw distance set quite low. So I think the best thing we can do is jump into a scenario and see how this plays. And straight away we can see the limitations that we're starting to run into with this fairly low powered hardware, even though this game predates the computer by about 4 years. And though we don't need a particularly high frame rate to play a game like this, you can see how choppy this is and how jerky it is, and this is just the start of the theme park. We've barely got any rides in here yet. It's only going to get worse, not better, from here on in. Let's go back into the graphics settings to try and sort this out. As you can see, we're already at the minimum resolution of 800 by 600, so we'll turn off 32-bit colour. And we'll take detail level and draw distance and textures down, get them closer to the minimum, and let's see if that makes any difference in the game. And it's maybe a little bit better, but sadly not a whole lot. It's still really choppy, and it's still only going to get worse as we get more rides into the park and whatnot, so I think we're hitting the limits of what we can do on this hardware. In summary, I think these upgrades have been a success. We can play games that are appropriate to the power level of the hardware that we've got, but Windows is nice and responsive now too. Programs open quickly and the experience is nice and fast, nice and snappy, so that whole frustrating user experience that we had before has gone. And if you just forget that this thing's got a touch screen and treat it as an all-in-one that doesn't have one, then the overall user experience is pleasant enough. But for now I'm just going to say I hope you've enjoyed this video, thank you very much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye bye.